The Akkadian Empire explained, circa 2334 to 2154 BCE. Over 4,000 years ago, in the fertile lands of Mesopotamia, a figure rose who would change human history forever. His name was Sargon of Akkad, and around 2334 BCE he established what is widely considered the first empire in recorded history. Before this, the region was made of independent Sumerian city-states, each with its own ruler, language variations, and constant rivalries. Sargon changed that. Through military conquest, he united the region under a single authority, creating a state that stretched from the Persian Gulf in the south all the way into parts of modern-day Syria in the north. For the time, this was an unimaginably large domain. What made the Akkadian Empire so groundbreaking was more than just conquest. Sargon introduced the idea of centralized rule. Governors loyal to him oversaw different regions, and taxes and resources were collected for the entire empire. He also promoted the Akkadian language as the official form of record-keeping, replacing local dialects and setting a standard for administration across territories. The empire thrived for about 2 centuries, but like so many that followed, it collapsed under a mix of internal rebellion, invasions by outside tribes, and environmental decline. Prolonged droughts made sustaining such a vast kingdom impossible. Yet its influence lived on. Future powers like Babylon and Assyria borrowed heavily from Akkadian systems of law, governance, and imperial structure. In short, the Akkadian Empire wasn't just an ancient kingdom. It laid the blueprint for every empire that came after. The Old Kingdom of Egypt explained, circa 2686 to 2181 BCE. Around 4,500 years ago, Egypt entered what became known as the Old Kingdom, often called the Age of the Pyramids. This was the era when the idea of the pharaoh as a god on earth truly took hold, and the gigantic monuments we still marvel at today were first raised on the banks of the Nile. Pharaohs like Djoser, Sneferu, and Khufu oversaw some of humankind's most astonishing construction projects. Djoser's Step Pyramid at Saqqara was history's first large-scale stone monument. Sneferu refined pyramid design, experimenting with a bent pyramid before perfecting the smooth-sided form. And then came Khufu, whose Great Pyramid of Giza still stands as one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world, built with precise alignment and millions of stone blocks, an engineering mystery that continues to spark awe and debate. This wasn't just about stone and symmetry. The monuments symbolized a divine order where the pharaoh was seen as the living embodiment of the gods. The centralized power of the royal court allowed Egypt to organize massive labor forces, redistribute food through taxation, and turn the Nile's predictable floods into stable prosperity. But by around 2181 BCE, cracks began to show. Weakened authority, financial strain from continuous grand building projects, and changing climate conditions led to political fragmentation, ushering in a period known as the First Intermediate Period. Yet the legacy of the Old Kingdom remained monumental, literally. The pyramids became timeless symbols of power and divine kingship, shaping how Egypt was perceived for millennia. Even today, these stone giants remind us of one of the earliest civilizations to think not just in decades, but in eternity. The Babylonian Empire explained, circa 1894 to 1595 BCE, revival c. 626 to 539 BCE. In the heart of Mesopotamia, the city of Babylon rose from obscurity to become one of the most iconic powers of the ancient world. Its first great peak came under King Hammurabi in the 18th century BCE. Hammurabi wasn't just a conqueror, he was a lawgiver. His famous Code of Hammurabi is one of the earliest surviving legal texts, with nearly 300 detailed laws carved into stone. Covering everything from trade to punishment, it gave Babylon a framework of justice that influenced legal systems for centuries. But Babylon's story didn't end there. After centuries of shifting fortunes, the empire experienced a glorious revival in the 7th and 6th centuries BCE under Nebuchadnezzar II. He rebuilt Babylon into a cultural and architectural wonder. The city walls and the Ishtar Gate, covered with dazzling blue tiles and decorated with lions and dragons, became symbols of imperial majesty. Ancient writers also credited him with constructing the legendary Hanging Gardens of Babylon, one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world, though historians still debate whether they truly existed or were a poetic metaphor. Despite its grandeur, Babylon eventually fell to the Persians under Cyrus the Great in 539 BCE. Yet its influence lived on in law, architecture, astronomy, and myth. To this day, Babylon remains a byword for both power and cultural brilliance, an empire remembered as much for its ideas as its conquests. The Assyrian Empire explained, c. 900 to 612 BCE. If Babylon was remembered for its laws and culture, the Assyrian Empire was remembered for something else entirely: sheer military dominance. From the 9th century BCE onward, Assyria transformed into what many historians call the war machine of the ancient world. The Assyrians perfected a style of conquest that combined advanced siege warfare, iron weaponry, and brutal psychological tactics. Cities facing Assyrian armies often surrendered before the first arrow flew, terrified by the empire's reputation for uncompromising brutality. Reliefs carved on palace walls proudly showed scenes of defeated kings humiliated, enemies flayed alive, or entire populations deported. The message was clear: resist and face annihilation. At their peak under kings like Tiglath-Pileser III, Sargon II, and Ashurbanipal, the Assyrians controlled an empire stretching from Egypt in the west to Persia in the east. Their capital, Nineveh, became both a military hub and a cultural jewel. Ashurbanipal, surprisingly, was not only a ruthless conqueror but also a scholar. He established one of the world's first great libraries, collecting thousands of clay tablets containing myths, laws, and scientific writings, including the famous Epic of Gilgamesh. But the very forces that built Assyria also led to its downfall. The empire was overextended, ruling harshly over resentful populations. By 612 BCE, a combined force of Babylonians and Medes rose against Nineveh. They sacked the great city, and the mighty empire crumbled almost overnight. Yet the Assyrians' impact lived on. Their methods of warfare, their administrative strategies, and Ashurbanipal's library influenced civilizations long after their fall. Even in ruin, Assyria carved into history the lesson that raw power can dominate, but rarely endure forever. The Persian Achaemenid Empire explained, c. 550 to 330 BCE. By the mid-68th century BCE, a powerful new vision of empire was born under Cyrus the Great. In just a few decades, he created the Achaemenid Persian Empire, stretching from the Indus Valley in the east to Asia Minor and parts of Greece in the west, the largest empire the world had ever seen. What set the Persians apart wasn't just their scale, but their unorthodox style of rule. Conquered peoples weren't bulldozed into submission. Instead, Cyrus allowed local customs, religions, and leaders to remain, as long as they pledged loyalty and paid tribute. This earned him respect as both a conqueror and a lawgiver, even mentioned positively in the Hebrew Bible. The empire flourished under Darius I, who organized it into satrapies, provinces governed by satraps, and built an efficient taxation and administrative system. To bind such vast lands together, Darius introduced coined money, weights, and measures, and the legendary royal road, which allowed couriers to deliver messages across thousands of kilometers at record speed. Later kings, including Xerxes I, clashed with the emerging Greek world, leading to epic conflicts like the battles of Thermopylae and Salamis. While Persia ultimately failed to conquer Greece, it remained a cultural superpower for nearly 2 centuries. The empire finally fell to Alexander the Great in 330 BCE. Yet its model of governance, tolerance, infrastructure, and centralized administration influenced empires from Rome to the modern era. The Persians proved that an empire could be built not just on the sword, but on roads, respect, and remarkable vision. The Shang Dynasty of China explained, circa 1600 to 1046 BCE. Long before the Great Wall and the Terracotta Army, China's early dynasties were already laying the foundations of one of the world's richest civilizations. Among them, the Shang Dynasty stands out as one of the first to leave behind a truly detailed record of its rule. The Shang kings ruled from fortified cities along the Yellow River, and authority rested on the belief that rulers were chosen by and connected to the divine spirits of ancestors. This concept, that heaven communicated its approval or disapproval through a dynasty's success, evolved into what later became known as the Mandate of Heaven. Much of what we know about Shang society comes from mysterious oracle bones, turtle shells, and ox scapulae used for divination. Court diviners carved questions about the harvest, warfare, or royal births, and then interpreted the cracks formed by heating the bones. These inscriptions are the oldest known form of Chinese writing and direct ancestors of modern Chinese characters. The Shang were also pioneers in bronze technology, casting elaborate vessels for both ritual and warfare, showcasing incredible craftsmanship. Their armies employed advanced bronze weaponry and horse-drawn chariots, which placed them ahead of rivals in strength. Eventually, the Shang dynasty fell to the emerging Zhou in the 11th century BCE, but its legacy, writing, ancestor worship, and the fusion of religion with kingship formed the enduring backbone of Chinese civilization. The Shang remind us that even in the Bronze Age, societies were writing their stories, sometimes literally, into history itself. The Olmec civilization explained, c. 1200 to 400 BCE. Deep in the jungles of what is now southern Mexico, around 1200 BCE, the Olmec civilization flourished, often called Mesoamerica's mother culture. While not an empire in the traditional sense, the Olmec laid down the cultural building blocks for later giants like the Maya and the Aztec. They are most famous for their colossal stone heads, massive basalt sculptures carved with distinct facial features, some weighing over 20 tons. These works still puzzle historians. Were they portraits of rulers, athletes, or spiritual figures. Whatever the truth, they showcase the Olmec's advanced artistry and monumental ambition. The Olmec also built ceremonial centers with pyramids and central plazas, practiced sophisticated agriculture and trade, and played the ritual Mesoamerican ballgame, which would echo through later cultures. Most intriguingly, evidence suggests they developed early forms of writing and calendars, setting the stage for Mesoamerican record-keeping and astronomy. By around 400 BCE, the Olmec cities declined, possibly due to environmental change, resource exhaustion, or internal unrest. Yet their influence didn't dissipate. Later civilizations inherited their symbols, religious concepts, and artistic styles. The Olmec weren't just one culture among many. They were the foundation stone upon which Mesoamerican civilization was built. The Macedonian Empire explained, c. 336 to 323 BCE. Fast forward to the Mediterranean in the 4th century BCE, where a young king from a rugged land transformed the known world in just over a decade. His name was Alexander of Macedon, better remembered as Alexander the Great. Inheriting the throne at only 20, Alexander quickly turned his attention to Persia, the superpower of the time. Through daring tactics, disciplined phalanxes, and brilliance on the battlefield, he shattered Persian rule and marched ever eastward, through Egypt, across Mesopotamia, into Central Asia, and even as far as India. By 323 BCE, his empire was the largest the ancient world had ever seen, stretching from Greece to the Indus River. But Alexander wasn't only about conquest. He deliberately spread Hellenistic culture wherever he went. Greek philosophy, art, architecture, and science blended with the traditions of Egypt, Persia, and beyond. Cities like Alexandria in Egypt became world centers of learning, trade, and multicultural innovation. The empire itself was short-lived. Alexander died suddenly at just 32, and his generals carved his territories into rival kingdoms. Yet the cultural fusion he created, the Hellenistic world, endured for centuries, shaping everything from Roman education to early Christianity. The Macedonian Empire proved that one man's ambition could redraw the map, but more importantly, it showed how ideas can outlast armies. The Maurya Empire explained, c. 322 to 185 BCE. In the aftermath of Alexander the Great's invasions, northern India witnessed the rise of a powerful new state, the Maurya Empire, founded by Chandragupta Maurya around 322 BCE. His ambition, and the guidance of his shrewd advisor Chanakya, transformed a patchwork of kingdoms into one of the largest empires in Indian history. It was under his grandson, however, that the Maurya legacy was forever secured. Ashoka the Great began his reign as a conqueror, famously waging the bloody Kalinga War, which left hundreds of thousands dead or displaced. The horror of that conflict changed him profoundly. Ashoka turned away from violence and became a champion of Buddhism, promoting tolerance, compassion, and non-violence across his empire. He inscribed these values into stone through his iconic pillars and edicts, monumental messages carved in local dialects across South Asia. They warned against cruelty, encouraged fair governance, and spread Buddhist teachings far beyond India, influencing regions as distant as Sri Lanka and Central Asia. Though the Maurya Empire unraveled after Ashoka's death, his transformation from warrior to moral ruler became legendary. He showed that empires could win loyalty not just with armies, but with principles, a message that still resonates globally. The Roman Empire explained, 27 BCE, 476 CE, East until 1453 CE. When people hear the word empire, few names loom larger than Rome. Born from a republic, Rome transitioned into an empire in 27 BCE under Augustus Caesar, the first emperor. What followed became one of history's longest and most influential reigns of power. The Romans built an empire of astonishing scale, stretching from the deserts of North Africa to the chilly Isles of Britain. Their strength lay as much in engineering and organization as in legions. Rome constructed massive roads and aqueducts, unrivaled amphitheaters like the Colosseum, and sprawling cities connected by law and commerce. The idea of Roman citizenship bound a diverse population under common rights and duties, creating unity across continents. Of course, Rome was also a world of contradictions. The grandeur of philosophy, art, and law existed alongside the brutality of gladiatorial combat and slavery. Emperors like Augustus, Trajan, and Marcus Aurelius built stability and expansion, while others like Nero and Commodus nearly unraveled it. The Western Empire ultimately collapsed in 476 CE under the weight of invasions, economic strain, and political instability. But Rome's eastern half, the Byzantine Empire, endured for nearly 1,000 more years. Rome's true legacy lives on in modern languages, architecture, legal systems, and even calendars. Simply put, Rome didn't just shape Western civilization. In many ways, it defined. The Han Dynasty of China explained, 206 BCE, 220 CE. After the fall of the short-lived Shang Dynasty, China entered one of the most celebrated eras in its history, the Han Dynasty. Lasting over 4 centuries, the Han became the foundation of China's identity, so much so that even today, the majority ethnic group in China still calls itself the Han people. The Han rulers blended strong central power with Confucian philosophy, emphasizing harmony, duty, and merit. They introduced the civil service exam system, where officials were chosen for knowledge rather than just noble birth. This was revolutionary, a career path based on talent rather than family name. Economically, the Han Dynasty flourished thanks to Silk Road trade. Chinese silk, porcelain, and paper traveled westward, while goods and ideas from India, Persia, and Rome flowed into China, making it one of the earliest engines of globalization. Science and innovation continued to bloom, including advancements in seismology, astronomy, and medicine. The famous records of the grand historian by Sima Qian also captured China's past in unprecedented detail, reinforcing a sense of shared heritage. But by the 2nd century CE, the Han struggled with powerful warlords, natural disasters, and corruption. The dynasty fractured, leading into the turbulent Three Kingdoms period. Still, the Han's governance, culture, and international connections left an enduring mark, setting the blueprint for imperial China for centuries to come. The Maya civilization explained, circa 2000 BCE, 1697 CE, peak c. 250 to 900 CE. Across the ocean in Central America, the Maya civilization emerged as one of the most brilliant cultures of the ancient world. Though its roots go back as early as 2000 BCE, its classical peak between 250 and 900 CE produced some of humanity's most remarkable accomplishments. The Maya organized themselves not as one unified empire, but as a network of city-states such as Tikal, Palenque, and Calakmul. Each city built towering step pyramids, sophisticated palaces, and sprawling plazas. Masters of astronomy and calendars, the Maya could predict eclipses with stunning accuracy. They developed a complex written script, one of the very few fully developed writing systems in the pre-Columbian Americas, with inscriptions that still reveal details of dynasties, wars, and rituals. Society revolved around powerful kings and a religious world filled with gods of maize, rain, and death. Ritual ball games and ceremonies, sometimes involving human sacrifice, marked their devotion to divine cycles. Mysteriously, by around 900 CE, the great southern cities fell into decline. Factors such as overpopulation, droughts, and warfare likely played roles. Yet Maya culture never vanished. Northern cities like Chichen Itza thrived for centuries, and Maya communities continue to live in Mexico and Central America today. The Maya are remembered not just for their pyramids and calendars, but for reminding us that brilliance can rise in every corner of the globe, often in ways modern science is still struggling to fully understand. The Byzantine Empire explained, 330 to 1453 CE. When the Western Roman Empire collapsed in 476 CE, one might assume Rome's story was over. But in truth, its eastern half, the Byzantine Empire, carried the torch for nearly 1,000 more years. It began in 330 CE, when Emperor Constantine made Constantinople his new capital. Strategically perched between Europe and Asia, the city became a bridge of trade, culture, and defense. The Byzantines preserved Roman law through works like Justinian's Code, kept alive Greek philosophy and science, and made Christianity the heart of their empire, even building the majestic Hagia Sophia, one of history's most iconic cathedrals. For centuries, Byzantium stood as a bulwark between Europe and powerful rivals, fending off Persians, Arabs, and later Seljuk Turks. Its diplomats were masters of intrigue, using alliances, gold, and cunning as often as armies. At times the empire blossomed with wealth and learning. At others, it trembled under crusaders, plagues, and internal strife. Finally, in 1453, after a heroic last stand, Constantinople fell to the Ottoman Turks. Cannons breached its great walls, marking the end of the Byzantine Empire and the start of a new era. Still, the Byzantines' legacy is immense. They transmitted Roman, Greek, and Christian traditions into the Renaissance and beyond. While the Western Roman Empire became legend, Byzantium was Rome's living survival, longer, more colorful, and just as world-shaping. The Mongol Empire explained, 1206 to 1368 CE. Where the Byzantines endured with patience, the Mongols exploded onto the world stage with ferocity. Led by Genghis Khan, a once impoverished nomadic warrior from the Asian steppe, they built the largest land empire in history in just a few generations. Starting in 1206, Genghis united the feuding Mongol tribes and unleashed them outward. Their armies moved with terrifying speed, mounted on horseback, armed with composite bows, and backed by ruthless discipline. City after city fell, from Central Asia and Persia to China, Russia, and even into Eastern Europe. Entire populations were wiped out in acts of psychological warfare meant to terrify others into surrender. And yet, alongside the brutality came brilliance. The Mongols created a remarkably connected world through the Pax Mongolica, a period of stability that allowed trade, ideas, and technologies to flow along the Silk Road like never before. Paper, printing, gunpowder, and even cuisine crossed continents thanks to Mongol networks. At its peak, the empire stretched from the Pacific to the Black Sea, an empire unrivaled in scale, though difficult to govern. After Genghis's death, it splintered into regional khanates, but its impact remained. The Mongols showed that power could be won in a heartbeat of history, and that even armies built on fear could leave behind a lasting gift, a more interconnected world.